Hospital Porter's Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order, and welcome to this Apollo Detectives 12. Can you believe it's the 12th one we've ever done? And I mean, I know on my channel there are fewer videos because I combined a couple of them, but basically there are 12 complete programs. Now, if you want to listen to the original, go to Neil Geddes-Ward's channel, Neil Geddes-Ward's channel. There'll be a link in the description box to that. And you can just watch it without all my waffle. Or if you want my waffle, you can hang around, because I'll tell you what, this is going to be slightly different to other Apollo Detectives programs, because as you gathered, we have an extra member of the team. We have the return of a few old regulars and faithfuls like Marcus Allen, Scott Henderson, Neil himself, me. But we are joined by none other than Steve Mumbling. Yes, I know that's going to be very controversial, and indeed it will be. So, just for a change, I'm going to be doing a commentary at the end of this program as well. Ladies and gentlemen,
Not a pretend
welcome. We're already getting started already. Welcome. This is Apollo Detectives. It's our 12th program. I'm Ben Emlyn Jones. I'm joined by a number of people. We've got someone else joining us later. But to begin with, I'd like to say a big hello to my esteemed director and producer, Neil Geddes-Ward. Hey, Neil. How you doing?
Hello. Hi, Ben. Hi, everybody. Good to be here once again. Thanks for having us.
And of course, we are joined by one of our stalwarts. He's been in almost all of them, I think, if not all. It's Marcus Allen of Nexus Magazine. Hey, Marcus.
Hello. Thanks, Ben.
Great. And coming out of the red corner, we have a little surprise for you. You wouldn't believe it. This is going to surprise everyone, actually. I've been dying to tell you. We've got Steve Mumbling himself. Hello, Steve. How you doing?
Yes, I'm very well, Ben. Thank you.
Oh, great. So we're going to begin our discussion now on the moon landings, and I think you're going to find that we're going to have more divergent views than usual, which you should provide very entertaining.
How do I record this? So I've never done Skype before.
Well, on Skype, only one person can record on Skype.
Right.
I mean, yeah, unfortunately. I'm just going to try and add Scott. Hang on. Scott Felton, Irene, Scott Henderson, here he is. Well, you'll like his avatar.
So you can record it, and you can have the complete power of editing this, and I just do nothing. All I do is say, well, he said this, and I said this, and you're honest.
Steve, if you get any more paranoid, we'd start to think you're a conspiracy theorist. We really will. You can make your own. You're not
confident enough to do this live, are you? I'm quite happy to do it live.
Steve, you can do what I do. You can use a backup recorder. Now Marcus is recording the call right now. Okay, no one else can record. Oh, Scott, all right, mate. No one else can record the call.
Scott Henderson.
However, Steve, you can actually use a backup player to record at least the audio, which is I'm going to do, right? If you want to, I recommend MP3 Skype Recorder 6.1. If you download that now, you can make your own copy of it.
If Neil told me that I would be able to record this, I would have my own copy.
Well, you can get your own. Have your own copy.
That was a blatant lie, wasn't it? I mean, if I'd have known that I couldn't have done that, and then I could have arranged something, I could have arranged the audio output to go to a mixer. I could have said it.
Well, this is going to be a right bundle of laughs, isn't it?
Steve, with some sort
it's not a lie. You just need a portable Skype recorder. You can have a backup audio which you can use in a company.
As soon as this video is finished, you will get a copy automatically on Skype.
Yeah, you can download your own copy, a raw file as well, not edited.
Right there in the chat for you when it's
okay. All right.
Okay. And that happens automatically. Everybody here gets a copy of that automatically.
Okay.
Steve, it's not edited. It's your copy.
Yes, precisely.
Okay. We'll see how we go then, Jim.
Yeah.
Steve, look at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen,
and there should be 4 dots, one of which says record. Press it and you'll record it.
I don't know. Can Steve do that?
Recording.
No, I don't think Steve can do it because only you're already recording it, Marcus.
See, when I'm looking at it right now, it says it's recording.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Already.
Yeah, you can't. One person can do that.
Mine finishes, everybody gets a copy automatically.
Yeah. It appears in chat. It appears in the live chat, and it can be downloaded by anyone who actually is in the call.
So, yeah, okay. So mine says stop record. So at the end, I'll press stop record and then hang up, because apparently if you don't press stop record, you lose it. Is that right?
No, only Marcus can do that because he's the one recording it. But what you can, you won't
automatically get a copy.
Okay.
Yeah. You won't lose it.
Right in the chat there.
No, you won't lose it. Where's this? Oh, all right. Oh dear, Neil's having more.
He's probably chasing those fairies or something.
No worries. Steve is keeping us is keeping us entertained.
Steve, which part of Australia do you live?
Well, I live just outside of Perth, Western Australia.
All right, okay. And what sort of car do you drive?
I'm not going to tell you that. That's one of the things. It's an open question that I leave out there for the people that claim remote viewing. I have more than one car. I have a few cars, but I'm not going to say what makes, models, colours they are, and that sort of stuff, because I say, all right, you can remote view. Tell me what vehicles I own, what are the makes and models, what colours are they? Describe. Admittedly, I've let the cat's a bit out of the bag here, whereas I describe the inside of my house. This is only a small part of it. So that can still stand as a question for the people that claim viewing.
But no one's a Holden, because you film yourself driving in this Holden, so at least you buy your native, you get the Australian.
Well, there's at least one detective. There we go.
Well, I don't have to be a detective, Steve. I've watched your channel. I'm
flattered, Ben. I'm flattered.
You know, I'm your Marley Pumpkin. You know that, don't you?
I've no idea what Marley Pumpkin is.
Oh, he's somebody who watches he's a bit like you, except he doesn't leave such entertaining comments. He tends to just say, it's awful, it's absolutely terrible, this is the dog shit video. And I said, well, why'd you watch it then? At least you try to make it. And we don't do it very well, but at least you try.
I think I do very well. But you ignore most of the points I make.
I don't think I do. I think
you do. Absolutely.
Oh, I disagree. Okay. Steve, Neil's now downloading Skype again. Oh dear.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, while we're waiting for Neil to download his version of Skype, this is something I've been wanting to ask Henderson for a long time. And that is, one of these episodes...
might as well start now.
You said that, you can't get video pictures from the moon because of the inverse square law. We all know that. So how did you come to that conclusion? Can you show me your calculations for the Moon-Earth path loss? That's something that every communications engineer would do, certainly what the communications engineers would have done when they designed the system for the Apollo missions.
Are you sure they did?
Absolutely. I've done the same calculation.
And what's your answer?
It works.
What?
And why do you think every radio communications engineer on the face of the Earth isn't saying that can't be done? Because they all know it can be done. So where's your calculations, Scott? How do you come to that conclusion? What do you have to back up that statement?
On communications, as a matter of fact, I was showing Marcus a PDF file on it the other day, showing that the radio waves bounce off. What was it at 75 miles and 220 miles between day and nighttime?
This has nothing whatsoever to do with the question. It's a calculation. It's a simple calculation. Any radio engineer can do. You would need to know. You would need to know the lunar module transmitter power, for example. So what power level did you use in your equation, your calculation, to come up with that statement?
I'm using NASA's PDF files.
What power level did you use in your equation, in your calculation?
What power level? Well, from and moved to the Earth, they had 14.5 watts.
Nope.
That ran their entire distance.
That's not the transmitter power level. What was the
That's
transmitter?
all they had.
What was
for
the transmitter?
communications.
What was the transmitter antenna gain? I've read all the stuff from Collins on the communication system.
What
You're
was
talking
the
rubbish.
antenna power gain that you're claiming?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking you, because you need to know the transmitter power, you need to know the transmitter antenna gain, you need to know the path loss between the moon and the Earth, and you need to know the gain of the antenna.
Inverse square
Yeah,
law
and-
of insertion loss.
What figures did you use? You just pulled that statement out of your backside, didn't you? Because you thought it sounded good. That's the truth.
No, I'm looking for the document here. Actually,
Is that document going to contain your calculations, Scott?
Now, give him a chance.
No,
Steve, give him a
no,
chance.
this
Give
is
him a
the
chance,
backbone.
mate. He's
He's got
given
no
asked a
bloody-
question. He's getting
he's got
figures.
no idea what I'm talking about, has he?
Well, give him a chance. He's just we don't have everything stored immediately in our frontal lobes. Sometimes we have to
no, you're
pick
just
up our
you
sources.
just pull something out of a hat. Do you know how many documents I have here?
I'm asking you a question about a statement.
Then he's answering you, Steve. He's answering you.
I'm
Then
going
ask-
to give you a little example of the documents I have.
I don't care. I'm not interested.
Have you
I'm
read
asking you
any
a
of these
question.
documents? I'm going to pull them. I'm going to pull them up. I'm going to share the screen here, and I'm going to pull them up.
So you're not going to answer the question, Scott? Is that
He is
the bottom
answering it.
line here? He's not.
He's
When I find the document,
Yeah.
did you recall the document I sent you, Marcus?
Yeah.
Okay, showing the radio signals.
Yeah.
How they bounce off the Earth's atmosphere.
Yeah. Absolute nonsense.
Steve. When you
Absolute-
asked me a
Absolute
question on
nonsense.
YouTube, right?
Yeah, but I didn't make it up.
I can.
Yes, you're talking rubbish.
When you ask me a question on YouTube, on the YouTube comments section,
So you call
I
it
go away,
rubbish.
look something up, and come
I'm-
back into.
I know. I know it. I know it's
Documents.
rubbish, because if somebody asked me, I could say, was this transmitter power? Was this transmit antenna gain? This is the path loss over the distance. This is the receiver antenna gain. This is the path loss across the system.
You've got a photographic memory, Steve. Not everyone else has. Let's go answer a question.
I just know what I'm talking about. You
share the
don't.
screen with you here.
Let's Scott
Okay.
get his source material and examine it, and then he'll answer your question.
What's happened now?
He's sharing screen. This is a thing on Skype. It's very easy to do. You just press a button and it allows you to share documents and things like that for all the participants. I was going to tell Neil that we've already started creating material. This is going to be
Yeah, but
Okay, here's the file folders that I have.
I'm not interested.
Find the one that you just pull out of your hat. Okay,
You made a statement, and what did you do? What calculation did you do to back that statement up? I'm saying that statement is complete and utter rubbish, and that's something that
you say it's complete and utter rubbish.
It is
Okay.
utter, not udder. Udders are on cows, Scott.
Just whatever. Okay.
You should listen to yourself sometimes,
These
Steve.
PDF files here. Here's a folder. Okay, there's 15.
Well,
in there.
look, it's obviously going nowhere. I'll give you an easier one.
Okay, but I'm just going to show you what you asked me for one document. And here's what I have to look through to find your document.
Well, you can find it while we're talking about some other stuff, Scott, if you like.
Here's
How about
another.
that? This is going to hold us up.
Here's another. Well, I'm just going to show you. Have you read any of these files? Have you read?
I can't even see
There are
it.
1,000 pages.
This is not
law.
This is not
Okay, we're looking here.
Look, that
Here's another
calculation.
file with just
That
PDF
calculation.
This one has 200.
That calculation is 2 lines long.
Here.
Well, Steve,
The bottom line is,
There's
Come on, Steve.
PDF files here. Do you want me to read them all to you?
I want you
So we
to
find the one
never.
that you're talking about?
Steve, you've asked
Well,
Scott a
I'm-
technical question.
I
And
want
you've asked me to pull up the file to show you.
That
what
is
I
not
was
what I
talking
that's
about.
that's
It's in
not
here.
what I asked
Trust
at all.
You have to be
Not what I
patient,
asked
Steve.
at all.
Be patient.
Okay.
Scott's been on
So
the
now
show many
let's-
times. He's a reasonable chap.
That's not what I asked at all. What I said was, you made the statement that it was impossible due to the inverse square law. So where's your path loss calculation to support that statement? It's a simple enough question.
It's hard.
You pull your
Why don't you just?
calculations up.
Why don't?
Why don't calculate?
Why not?
Show them on the screen while I'm
I'm just going to add. Right,
Why-
to Neil.
Why,
Here we
why
go.
don't you just admit you've got
You're not
no
even looking
idea
at the
how
site.
to do?
Neil
I'm not. I can't see it.
not even looking at this. I'm trying to show you what
This is bullshit, Scott. This is rubbish, nonsense. Nothing whatsoever.
Neil is coming in.
This is all the stuff I've
Neil,
studied.
come on in. I don't. Is Neil? Neil, are you there?
You've done a lot of studying and you know nothing, Scott. Why don't you just admit you just pulled that out of your backside that
No,
it's
Steve,
impossible
you've
due to the inverse square law, and you've got
Steve.
no calculation to back it up. That's the truth, isn't it?
You've asked Scott a very technical question. You've asked him a technical question. He has
not a very technical question.
You may have a photographic memory. Most other people don't. Scott has the information there. He's talked about the information before.
I've read.
Then give him a chance to answer you.
Yes. But what he says is,
Give him a chance.
If you want to look it up, on the Earth's
He'll leave
atmosphere,
it there.
okay, and the radio waves and how they're reflected back.
okay,
Neil's calling.
okay. What frequencies are you talking about there, Scott? That get reflected off the Earth's
Hey, Neil.
atmosphere?
I can hear guides.
Hello, Neil.
I can't
Hello.
We're already well underway. The party is.
See, someone that knows someone that's not a bloody amateur that knows nothing whatsoever about it would not know that the Earth's atmosphere is transparent to microwaves.
All right, tell you. Yeah.
Okay, here's one right here.
Magnetosphere.
Here's a nice little document right here. Okay, and I'm sharing the screen, just so you know. This test was being done in 2014. Okay, and this document,
This has got nothing whatsoever to do with the
Steve,
question, Scott.
this is exactly what it's got to do with.
No, it hasn't. This is nonsense. What's this
Explain, Steve. Let him
Now, listen.
explain.
Shut up and you'll learn something. Okay,
Yeah, you'll learn
this
something.
document is from MIT.
Can I mute at the time?
Okay,
I'll mute.
it's a Terasat.
Yeah, what's it doing?
This particular test was being developed to send and receive signals between two satellites between 500 miles and 800 miles above the Earth, 5,000 miles apart.
Nothing whatsoever to do
There's
with
all the calculations,
Nothing whatsoever.
simulations of their transmission wave.
Well, I'm muted.
This is
No.
running through the Van Allen belts. Okay?
I will
Now,
use the
very large.
Look, Scott, you're wasting time, mate. This is nothing whatsoever.
Look, Steve, I've muted Steve. Carry on, Scott.
This is signals being sent between two satellites between 500 miles and 800 miles off the surface of the Earth, and the satellites are 5,000 miles apart. Okay? They're showing all of the different band waves that they're going to use for the simulations. Here's the equipment. Here's how it's being designed by MIT through. Okay? This is what they were expecting to send. On all of their different graphs, they're using every bandwidth available throughout it. This is the Terasat document. Okay, the thing was never launched. There's the actual path that we're going to be traveling on, the whole 9 yards.
Okay.
This is MIT.
Steve, we will let you respond to this, okay? I'm not here to silence you. So what's the purpose, what was the purpose of the experiment, Scott? Was this
To
to...
see if they can communicate between two satellites that are 5,000 miles apart, orbiting the Earth, one at 500 miles and the other one's at 800 miles up.
Hmm.
Okay?
Okay.
Now, why would they need to be testing that if they're having trouble communicating? If you're looking at anything from the Van Allen probes, it was in an elliptical orbit, and it had to be within 400 miles on the orbit to send the signal back. It went out and then came back in, and that's when it could send the signal. Okay? This is one testing from 500 to 800 miles out, because they cannot get through the ionosphere.
Right. So if this was... How is this relevant to the Apollos? Because it's a similar system with Apollo.
If you can't send it past that,
Right. Okay, Steve. Oh, where's Steve? Oh, here he is. All right, Steve. Let me just how do I? Let me just take you off mute. There we go.
There, that's the document.
Right, you are.
Of course, you read it because you have all of the information. You keep telling me I know nothing.
I'm trying to unmute Steve
I
right
just
now.
showed
How do you mute? I mean, how do you unmute
I
him?
just showed you the documents I've read.
Right, look. C4 video pin. Send me. How do you unmute someone? Does anyone know? I can't. Sorry, Steve. I'm trying to unmute you.
I think if you mouse over,
Okay.
Neil's got to unmute himself.
Neil. Yeah. Steve. Can you unmute yourself? Now, there should be a microphone button with a red line through it. If you press that, you should be able to speak again. I didn't realize you had to do that. Yeah, good. Go ahead. Right, you feel free to reply, Steve, and Scott, let Steve reply now.
Okay, so you can hear me now, can you?
Yes, go ahead.
That was all a complete waste of time and is completely meaningless. Had nothing whatsoever to do with the question.
Why?
that has to do with radio communications.
No, we're talking about the Apollo communication system. We're not talking about experiments done between two satellites in Earth orbit. So why don't you just admit you know nothing about it and you hold that statement out of your backside?
How do you go 250,000 miles?
Scott, Steve Scott, Scott's explained it is relevant.
If you knew anything about it, Scott, you would know how it would go 250,000 miles. How many times do I have to tell you? It's a simple calculation using the information provided by NASA, not this other bloody stuff you've got there that's got nothing whatsoever to do with it. You're completely clueless, mate. You just won't admit it. Why don't you just admit you just said that? By the sound of it, you got no idea.
You're not sure explaining why those
article, and you claim that that's it because NASA, they put a NASA sticker on it. And
every radio communications engineer on the face of the Earth could do it. It's a standard calculation for paths. Lots of people do microwave links, satellite comms, space comms. You know, it's a simple calculation, and every one of them will be laughing at you.
No, Steve, I could say
because you're coming across.
The British Interplanetary Society has been running tests using radio waves since 1959.
Look, Scott.
Okay, bouncing them off the Van Allen belts, bouncing them off the Aurora, and everything else. And there's lots of articles, and they even have nice little.
This is completely irrelevant.
Videos on discussing that exact fact, and they're talking exactly about the Van Allen belts destroying the signal as it's being bounced back.
Have you ever worked professionally in space communications?
More rhetoric, more adjectives. That's all you want to do.
I'm just asking a question.
Show us your credentials.
I've worked.
I just showed you that I've done. You haven't done it. Show me yours. Pull your all your files up that you have on.
Guys, Scott and Steve, right? This is now coming up personal issue.
Decades, okay.
You know,
I used to do super yacht systems on super yachts. Okay, this is back in the 80s.
The
big mega yachts. Okay, and they had satcom systems on it. It was Inmarsat. Now the Inmarsat satellites are geostationary. Okay, they're 23,000 miles out in space. And the communications on the yachts goes through the satellites. You've got absolutely no idea about any of this. You're clueless, mate. Yeah.
That's rhetoric. Steve, I could say...
You could Google that. You can find out where the satellites are. You can find out the altitudes of the satellites. All the satellite television. That's all 23,000 miles out.
That sends a balloon for a spy satellite, right?
Steve, can I ask you a question, Steve?
All this is easily verifiable. Anyone, even any of you lot, could Google it and see where these satellites are.
Could I ask you a question, Steve?
You're going to put satellites 23,000 miles out in space. If the signals can't reach it, you cretin.
Oi, let's not have any rudeness here. That, Steve, that's out.
I can't help it. Okay, I'll try.
Can I ask you a question? If I was to say 2 plus 2 equals 5...
Again, nothing whatsoever to do with what we're saying.
No, if I was to say this, right, if I was to say 2 plus 2 equals 5, and every decent mathematician knows that, and everyone who doesn't believe that 2 plus 2 equals 5 is clueless, right? Would that mean that 2 plus 2 would no longer equal 4?
Well,
you're giving us a lot of rhetoric. You're being aggressive. You're calling people names. You're focusing on individuals.
It's late at night, and I find your rubbish, which is what it is, irksome. Okay, I'll try and keep myself under control.
Thank you.
But any of this is very easily verifiable. Just Google it. Just Google where the television satellites are.
But you haven't really, Steve. You haven't really.
I'm going to show you where the satellites are. Here they are, right here.
This is a map showing transatlantic cables.
Yes. That's how we're communicating right now.
Okay.
Completely irrelevant.
Oh, this is complete rubbish. This is just bullshit. This is
fine.
These cables. They don't communicate. They don't do anything. It's a complete waste of time. What are they?
So what you're implying?
What are they doing with these cables?
What you're implying is that not only was the Apollo mission.
I'm not implying anything. I'm showing you.
But this is okay. Well, this is fair enough. There's no. I don't have a problem with this. But this is in addition to all the satellites. You're not showing satellites, are you? You're showing undersea cable.
I'm showing you what satellites look like.
No, you're not. So you're saying all space communications is fake as well. Satellite television, that's all fake. The satellites aren't really out there. That's all the same.
Stable communication.
Do you have anything real in your life, Scott? This is all rubbish, nonsense.
Well, it's
completely irrelevant.
I guess all those cables are rubbish, are they?
The cables are there, but the satellites are there as well. You're not showing that the satellites aren't there, right? You're showing that the cables are there.
Pull the map up and you show us where all the satellites are.
Any of you, even if you've got the IQ of a cheese and pickle sandwich, can Google television satellites, communication satellites, and you can find out where they are.
Scott, you showed us earlier a paper, a document, where which was all about how radio waves travel through space and through the atmosphere. What did that document demonstrate? Because I don't think we didn't really get a chance.
We never actually launched it. It was to test to see if they could communicate between two satellites 5,000 miles apart, one at 500 miles off the Earth's surface, and the other
every luxury
was a heavy band of highly ionized particles.
This guy is
and
a complete
Steve.
Waste of time.
They simply can't push a signal through.
Nonsense. I've done it. So has done it.
So
on a number of occasions, anything I say is verifiable. Everything you say is verifiably.
So when the lunar module was in 1969 and in the subsequent Apollo missions, it had an antenna. It had an antenna, and it was transmitting a signal. And this signal, I know it was picked up by other parks observatory in Australia, and this was like a radio telescope.
I got the thing. I'm going to put it right in the chat here.
Thanks.
So just to be clear, Scott, you're saying there's no such thing as communication satellites, there's no such thing as television satellites. Is that what you're saying? It's all fake.
I didn't say they aren't there, but not in the numbers, not anywhere near.
They're 20, all right, even if there's only one of them. And you could actually Google, I don't know how to bring it up, but there is a site that shows you all the satellites going around the planet. There's an awful lot of them.
For how
you're saying that they're not 23,000 miles out. Is that what you're saying, Scott? You couldn't get a signal to them 23,000 miles out. Is that right?
That's right.
Absolute bloody nonsense. This is anybody can verify that in 2 minutes.
It doesn't prove that, therefore, the Apollo communication system would work, though.
It proves that Scott Henderson is completely and utterly clueless.
Perhaps you can explain how President Nixon arranged a phone call with the astronauts on the moon. I mean,
you haven't shown me anything to date.
You can Google it yourself, Scott. I mean, I've never used Skype before. I haven't prepared any of this stuff, so you can Google it. Just
you Google years in this repair.
For you, why don't you, while we're talking now, just Google the Clark Belt and
Also,
learn something about satellites.
I'm also curious. Well, another thing that makes me curious is that during this phone call,
Okay, I'm
President
gonna
Nick
share
said to the
screen here. This is the from the document right there. Okay, because I cut that out, and it shows you how the waves are reflected.
I don't need to see any document.
All you need,
I know how it works. I know where the satellites are.
all you need to do is look at this document, and you see those layers that are there.
Did you see a news item?
Daytime, the night time, and it's showing you the radio waves are reflected back.
Yeah, no, they are
I did not create this document.
They're high frequency radio waves. They are not microwaves, Scott. Microwaves do not reflect off of any of those layers. They go straight through them. They are transparent to microwaves.
As a matter of fact, they don't.
As a matter of
finally,
fact,
got to a point.
Okay, but you're sitting there telling me that I'm full of shit. I haven't looked at anything. I haven't studied anything.
well, you may have looked and studied it, but you've got no bloody, you don't understand it at all. Anyone can look at it and read it, but you've got no bloody clue about any of it.
You're not explaining exactly. You've only said one thing, Steve. It actually is a rebuttal to what Scott has said, and that's the point you made about microwaves. And Scott has now replied to you, and he's actually said it's taken you like 20 minutes to get there, but you finally said something that's a real rebuttal. Now,
How many times do I have to say that any of you can Google right now, Clark Belt, look at television satellites, communication satellites, Inmarsat in particular? They're all geostationary satellites. To maintain a geostationary orbit, they have to be 23,000 miles out in space. You don't even know that.
I do, because they have to be over the same. They
there you go.
on the same point above the surface in the zenith.
You better tell Scott about it, because he seems to think it's impossible.
Well, it's not relevant. No, he's not actually. He's
the one
the satellite.
He's the one that started this. He's the one that started talking about satellites. And I said then it was irrelevant. We were supposed to be talking about Apollo. But he's demonstrated again that he has absolutely no understanding of this technology.
Really? And you think that a satellite is going to survive in the middle of the second band of the Van Allen belt when it's
just do yourself don't make yourself look more of a bloody goose than you already have.
You think it's going to survive? You think a satellite is going to survive?
Just Google that.
You realize in 1989, the eastern seaboard of North America was knocked out by a solar mass ejection.
Again, completely.
And what it does when it does that,
look at Marcus.
it takes the hydro line.
Steve,
I think that's tough. I think we're going to agree on
the energy in hydro lines, and it takes out the entire grid, the hydro grid on Earth. So what do you think it's going to do to those satellites when they're out there? I suspect in the middle of the Van Allen belts.
Something like a Carrington event or something like that, yeah. Steve, can you want to reply to that? There's no insults, just address Scott's point. You could unmute yourself now. Press the microphone where there's a red line through it, and you'll unmute yourself. Okay, go ahead. Steve is... That's it.
It's just a bit of a delay on it, that's all. But there's no point to address. He's talking complete and utter nonsense.
No, he just
as I said, how many times do I have to say it? Any of you can Google the Clark Belt and look at where the satellites are.
You can Google the Clark Belt all you want. When was the calculations made to create a geostationary satellite?
Who gives a shit? It's
what year? What year?
It's irrelevant.
It's not irrelevant. I'm asking you a question. What year did Clark do the calculation?
What exactly does this have to do with the Apollo missions being faked?
Well, I'll tell you what it has to do with. Okay? It was before Van Allen found out that the belts were there.
Oh, my goodness, here we go again.
Well, this is something we discussed before on previous shows. that the actual
Well, he
radar
doesn't watch
landscape of space.
previous shows. He doesn't watch it for videos.
Oh, look, I'll say
He
it.
just comes up and he's claiming that, oh, because NASA says this, it must be a fact.
That's not what I'm claiming at all. I'm saying any of you right now can Google the Clark Belt and you can see where the geostationary satellites are. Why don't you do it right now, Scott, and tell me how far they are away from the Earth? Just do it now. Take 2 minutes.
The geostationary one.
Read it to me,
I don't need to read it to you.
because it will make you look like a bloody idiot, won't it?
No, we'll make me
Steve,
look like an idiot. You
quit it
show
with the
me
insults.
Working. You
Look, can we just?
your phone.
It's obvious.
Tell me which site it's coming from.
It's obvious that you have absolutely no idea how any of this technology works,
Right. Well, then how?
and you're making ridiculous, unsubstantiated claims that it won't work, and you've got no idea how it works. I mean, you couldn't look at the video I showed Ben the other day, the retro turbo encabulator. It's a joke video. He couldn't even tell it was a bloody joke
Well,
because you don't understand technology.
Right. Well, how come these?
so it was something gotcha, was it, Steve?
All right, let's move on to something a little simpler. You claim that one of those flags was a sopping wet flag.
All right, well, first of all, can I just say before we move on, Steve has only really said two things in this entire, should I call it a conversation, which is a response to Scott's point. One of them was he mentioned the point about microwaves and about how they go through atmosphere. Second, he talks about the altitudes of geosynchronous satellites, which is those are the only 2 points you made, Steve, in this entire conversation.
All right,
So perhaps you could maybe we could have some efficiency of language from you, if you know what I mean, in the future. Anyway, all right, the wet flag then. What's the wet flag?
Hang on, let's just clear this up first. I asked Scott if he could show his path loss calculation from the moon to the Earth, because he said that it was impossible to get television pictures.
Show me yours. You got yours right handy, don't you?
I don't, but I don't. I'm not making a claim like that, am I? I'm not saying it's impossible. Anyone can tell you
it's possible. So you got to have the documentation to prove that.
Yeah, where's your photograph?
None of that. If you want to prove that man went to the moon and returned safely, you have to show every step of the way from the construction.
I don't have to do
piece of equipment to the launch.
I don't have to do anything.
Orbital mechanics,
You do,
everything.
Steve.
You got to show it 100%.
NASA has already done that.
No errors, no failures.
It's a positive claim.
Prove
Look,
man went to the moon.
You are proving
You only have to show
You
one
made-
error.
You made a simple,
positive.
you made a simple claim. You said it was impossible to get television pictures from the moon because of the inverse square law. Now, there's a formula that relates to that. All I said was,
Not with the power that they had on board. Not even with 100% of the
show me your calculation.
power.
Show me, anyone can say that. Show me the calculation.
When you were on the Shetland Islands
Prove your
with your
point.
cell phone, how come it doesn't work?
Come on, guys, get real.
Bloody allergy.
Yeah, okay. Well done, Marcus. Thank you. Yeah, I think we could safely say that Scott has got absolutely no idea about this technology. He's certainly not in a position to make a statement like it's not possible due to the inverse
Can I
square
make
law.
a- can I
He's
say
completely clueless about communication satellites, space communications, what frequencies go through the ionosphere.
Will you shut up for a minute? Shut up.
Just a complete
Hey,
and utter
I've got to
waste
say-
of time.
Just because you're in Australia doesn't mean to say you get away with anything.
Go on in, Marcus.
Yeah. Steve,
I'll get to you in a minute.
Let's talk about something a little bit more realistic. Photographic film. How much do you know about photographic film?
Not very much.
Okay. So the photographs that we've seen taken on the lunar surface are claimed by NASA as being on the lunar surface. If we can demonstrate that photographic film cannot work in space, those photographs could not have been taken on the lunar surface.
Well, there are some caveats to that, but just before we get to that bit, because I know that's your strong point, Marcus, the film. and you want to have some sort of go at this. But just want to ask Scott. He's claimed that flag is a sopping wet flag. I just wondered where he took his sample to get it analysed for moisture content.
Well,
Should I share a screen? Yeah, go
Well,
on.
but you can't look at a photograph and say something like that. You know, you need to substantiate what you're saying. You need evidence.
Well, NASA are saying that they took photographs of astronauts on the moon. I'm saying they couldn't.
That's it, Paul. Can I just
But can we
say
just,
something, Steve?
so Scott, well, how did you get the sample of the flag?
You take your photograph and you prove the amount of moisture content that's in there.
I'm not claiming there's any moisture content in the flag. You are. So prove it.
Well, you show me how much there isn't using the same photograph.
You don't. You really not very polite, are you,
Get your
Scott?
little sheet out there, and you do that.
Can you prove?
Can you see the screen?
How do you prove a negative?
I can't see it, Steve.
You're claiming is a wet flag.
Okay.
Prove it.
All right. Now I want to make a point, Steve. You said a little bit earlier. I know about the idea of the burden of proof, and you can't prove a negative and things like that. But now you try to apply that to NASA's claims about the moon landing, and they are claims. What NASA are making is a positive claim. It is not the onus. That word again. It's the onus is not on us or we who question NASA to prove our point. NASA also has to prove their point. They are making a
many
positive
times,
claim.
over and over and over again.
But just so we clear that up, this is not the burden of proof argument cannot be
So
applied.
all the pictures, all the video, all the transcripts, all the engineering drawings.
Should we let Marcus say a bit more about the pictures? Because you started to make a point about the pictures. So Marcus, carry on.
So I still haven't heard how Scott proves it's a wet flag.
I'll get to that in a
Show
second
me a
as well.
photograph and prove that that's in the photograph.
So what you're telling me is that you've got no idea if it's a wet flag or not because you never had a sample of it to test, did you?
Oh, we got what's that? Oh, this is it.
Here we go.
There you go.
Scott can come through this.
Pull it up.
So this is on my screen, but I've done some analysis of the previous photographs taken around the same time of this.
Hello, Neil.
Hello.
Evening. Good morning to you.
Good morning or good afternoon, actually, from here. So this is the main flag.
Can you see any fairies at the bottom of the garden?
No, we're not talking about fairies today. So here is the wet flag,
Goes to
Yeah.
credibility, Neil. Goes to
as
credibility.
claimed by Scott, and I agree. And you and others say
Yeah, but-
that it's just the shadows, etc., etc. So obviously, if you move a different angle, those shadows would disappear. So
Not
what I've
necessarily.
done is I've looked at other photographs of this wet flag from different angles taken around the same time.
This wet
Ah.
flag, yes, okay, Neil, go
You
on.
can still see areas where the wet flag is drying back. For instance, here, and also here,
I think
Stamp
that,
patch,
you know, if you wanted to
and
prove this,
here.
if you wanted to prove this, I mean, what you need to do is contact a company called Anin, who actually made that flag, and then ask them to sell you a flag, and then soak it, and then film it drying out.
Well, actually, that's
Under
something
similar lighting
considering to do it.
Yeah,
That's something
but you
I'd
see,
like
if that was a wet flag, for a start, the seam, wherever there is more material, will take longer to dry out, and the seam would be much darker, and it isn't, is it? Because
But it's
not a
on
wet
the
flag.
folds, though,
Fold it up so the edges dried.
It's on the folds. It also depends on which way the sun's shining. I mean, you've actually given us a good idea. Steve, that's actually a good idea for an experiment to test.
It's something I want to do.
I actually did a video ripping your claim to pieces there, Scott, about this wet flag, and Ben saw that and actually commented on it in one of his videos and said, "Steve's right, it's not a wet flag." Do you remember that, Ben?
I don't remember that. No, I mean, I don't remember that.
That's a convenient memory, isn't it? Memory loss.
Well, it's like Scott. I sometimes need to look things up.
Have you actually done a video?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Is it real? Is it actually you in the video? Can you reach into the video and touch you to make sure you're real?
I can
That's
point
wet
out.
flag.
I can point
There
out
you go.
all the flaws in your argument, Scott, in
Okay.
my video. What can you
This flag is
tell me?
billowy.
What can you tell me about what can you tell me about that particular flag, Scott?
Well, it's made out of three kinds of material. specially designed, stitched in so that it would handle a rigid pole across the top so it would fold out. It's stored on the side of the ladder. It's fully exposed the entire trip from launch on. Okay, the color will not fade because Mr. Demos told me exactly that most colors are made out of metal, so they wouldn't outgas on there.
So, so the dark
But
strip.
the nylon will, over time, outgas.
So the dark strip
Okay.
that the star's stitched onto is just a reinforcing strip. It's not wet.
The blue is one solid color. Okay. You can see the difference in the shading, and you can see the difference where it's wet. You can even see water drops where it's even wet.
You can't. You can see what you like if you look hard enough, Scott. But that particular flag was hanging on the wall in Mission Control for the whole Apollo mission series, and it was hanging just below a strip light, which is why it's faded in some places and not in others.
No, there's other stories where they ran down to the corner store and bought you because they nearly forgot to bring one. How do you like that?
That was Apollo 11. This is Apollo 17. This picture here.
That is definitely.
How do you like? How do you like that?
17. That's the geologists that landed on the moon, right? The lunar
that's where
Pontificala.
these pictures are from Apollo 17, aren't they? Or don't you know that? That's how much research. That's how much research you've done. Yeah. Okay.
And that's just
All right. Let's. We'll give you a chance here. Let's go with the film then, Marcus. Before I ask you why you would make certain comments to the British Interplanetary Society.
I'll just share the screen here again. We'll show you a real photograph of the wet
so.
flag.
Marcus, I'll come to you in a minute, Marcus. Sorry.
Yeah, this is a very small screen, Scott. It's not really worth showing you this stuff, to be honest. Just sort of get on with it.
Well, how do you know that? How can you study anything on a little tiny screen?
Because I've looked at it on a much. I've looked at it on. I've got more than one screen, Scott.
Talking about on a little tiny screen when you can't see the information. Okay, you see how clear?
Can you see this? Can you see? Can you read the screen behind me, Scott? This is 4 meters. This screen behind me. I've got more than one. I've got more than one screen, mate.
And you see that? Can you see the water drops up here now?
No.
On there, you see the wet.
I see them. Yeah, I can see drops. Yeah.
Water drops. No.
Here,
Well, I think he's here. See what you want to see, because you've got this. You're actually absolutely determined to maintain this ridiculous narrative that it's all faked. You're not remotely interested in the truth of the matter.
We could say that about you, Steve.
You
You're doing the same thing.
Yeah, but there's so much. The evidence for the moon landing being real is overwhelming.
what evidence?
You're just a bunch.
You're to maintain your narrative.
You're just a bunch of amateurs, a bunch of laymen giving opinions, looking at pictures. It's meaningless.
Yeah, and 2 + 2 = 5. Yeah, because anyone who says otherwise is an amateur layman. That's it.
And
Yeah,
you
Steve,
believe,
you understand the fallacy you're making it.
And you're an Australian vagabond. You're calling
you believe the Queen of England was
What's all
a
the
fake ship
little-
that is up from outer space.
Yeah, but that's got nothing to do with it. That's not. Again, you're deviating.
It goes to credibility.
You're deviating.
Believe anything.
Can you see? Can you still see? If you got clean your glasses off a little bit.
What am I looking at now?
Here's Buzz Aldrin
Yep.
in the doorframe.
Yep.
Okay, and it's a picture of him.
Okay.
There's
I'll tell you. How do I know? How do I know that's not Neil Armstrong?
Neil Armstrong taking the picture. Here's the edge of the doorframe right there. His PLSS is right up against the doorframe.
So you
You
think
see it
Neil
right there. You see it right there.
So you think Neil?
Come on, with the little, just
You think Neil Armstrong is taking the picture and not a member of the film crew? Then, Scott, do you?
Neil wasn't a member of the film crew.
Well, it doesn't matter who took it, but that's. I think Scott's. Scott makes his
See
point.
the doorframe right there? His backpack is right up against that doorframe, and he's sitting right, almost in a vertical position to that. Half that backpack is there.
He's
Now-
on his knee. He's on his knees just before bending forward to reverse out.
Yes, but his backpack cannot touch that door frame right there because that entire console is right there.
There's not much of a console there. There's a couple of armrests that actually tilt up out of the way.
Those
You
come in
can't-
over a foot. There's the door frame down. There's the door down
Honestly, Scott, I think
right there. It's right there
He-
underneath.
he could lean forward and easily
Right up
reverse
against that. How
through
can
that.
he be in that?
Um,
How can he be in that? How can he be up against that door frame?
You can't
Because
even,
this console is not here at all. And don't tell me it got moved out of the way.
you can't even interpret a simple photograph. He's on his knees. He's going to lean forward and reverse out. There'll be plenty of
you can't
between
lean
the
very
back
far with those
and
suits
that.
on, Steve.
How can his
And you would know that how, but
Have you?
touch
Well, if you look at the
door frame?
if you look at the footage of the astronauts moving on the moon,
this
it's pretty clear that there's limited mobility with those suits. Now there is some mobility. I can see they can walk, they can
We're not
bounce.
talking about mobility.
How much?
But
We're
they can't.
talking
They
about
can't.
the
You can't sit.
location.
You can't kneel in them, or you can't like
Of course you can.
squeeze your entire.
I see nothing wrong with that photograph. If that was me, I would easily
Nothing
be
wrong
able to
with that
reverse out of that hatch.
Not
nothing
wearing
wrong
that
with
suit, you couldn't. Have you seen James
Yeah,
Bliss
of course you
trying
could.
on the suit? Have you seen James Bliss test the suit?
How much does a 180-pound astronaut weigh on the moon, Scott?
65 pounds with his EVA suit. So 360 average 360 for the total weight is 65 pounds, 17.2% of the total.
And
There is the console. There's the console sitting in there, that far in. Okay,
Yeah.
the door frame is back here. That's the door frame. You can see it there. His,
Except Alex Collier's not here.
he has not his feet against that door frame because
This is like nonsense. This is
in the way.
This is just.
You
It
see
looks.
that now.
It's
No, I
a
want you
layman.
to see it. I want you to admit that you can see.
I can
see?
I can see that it's perfectly okay for Buzz Aldrin to be able to reverse through that hatch in 1/6 gravity. No problem at all.
I could probably
Can
do
he
it if I
put his
was wearing a suit.
backpack up against that door frame? No, he can't.
He's not
It's
lent.
in the way.
He hasn't leant forward, has he?
I've
He's up against the door frame.
This is meaningless, Scott. This proves nothing.
He's up against the door frame. You see that? He's up against the door frame.
If you actually look at
If it's in there, and I'm showing you that,
and you look at the
this
picture,
photograph here,
if you
or
look at the
says,
picture,
is this not real? Is this just
for a start, he is not up against the door frame. You can clearly see the
is
backpack.
Neil, I'd like to
The backpack is
Mark
a
here,
so he is not up against the door frame.
because Marcus hasn't had a chance really to speak yet.
He's just you've got no photographic interpretation ability, Scott.
Yeah, Neil, Marcus, Scott, Steve, Marcus, I think has some important points to make,
Yeah.
and I'd like to move on if that's all right. If that's right, you guys.
Yeah.
So, Marcus, you start telling us about the film, and please continue.
Yep. All the photographs were taken with this stuff, photographic film, which is a plastic backing on which the emulsion, the light-sensitive emulsion, is stored or is portrayed. The emulsion started life as a liquid. It's dried, otherwise you get a messy camera, but it was all photographic film. They didn't have digital cameras on Apollo. They had photographic film. Now,
Yeah, go on.
we're told it was taken on the moon. The photographs, there were 5,771 photographs taken on the lunar surface of the astronauts doing whatever they were doing.
Yeah.
Some photographic film is damaged in a vacuum, which it is. How come none of the photographs show any damage caused by the vacuum? Now, there were two other spacecraft that used photographic film.
We're not talking about those, though, are we, Marcus?
Photographic film being used in space, in the vacuum of space. One of them was a spy satellite, which orbited Earth,
Look, forget the spy satellites and all this other bloody.
No, it's relevant.
We're
I know what
talking
Marcus is
about
doing with this. It's completely relevant, Steve. Simply relevant.
I'm not going to forget it because it is important. It demonstrates a particular point that we're trying to establish. If photographic film is used in space and it is not damaged because it wasn't on the Hexagon spy satellite and it wasn't on the lunar orbiter, which orbited the moon to photograph potential landing sites for Apollo, used photographic film. When you examine the schematics of the Hexagon spy satellite and the lunar orbiter, you will see that all the photographic film within an airtight container on the spacecraft, which is pressurized. Not very much, about 1 pound per square inch pressure. When the designer of the Hexagon spy satellite was asked why you need to keep photographic film under pressure, he said quite unequivocal, quite straightforward.
I know what you mean, Marcus.
Okay. That photographic film has to be kept under pressure in a vacuum or it will be destroyed.
And what year was this statement made?
Say again?
What year was this Hexagon satellite doing its thing, and what year was that statement made?
The Hexagon spy satellite was first flown in 1969, and that statement was made in 2018.
Okay.
The reason being that the Hexagon spy satellite and its components were classified. They were declassified in 2011. That's why we were able to establish that there was a pressure retainer within the craft.
Different vehicle.
And-
Completely different system, isn't it?
It's a vacuum. It's a vacuum with
For a
pressurized.
start, a spy satellite camera is going to be completely different to the cameras used on the moon, isn't it?
It's about film, not the camera.
It's the film that's important.
Well, yeah, but a totally different camera is going to use a totally different film, isn't it? I mean, Eastman Kodak developed a special film to be used on the moon.
No.
You should know that. I mean, have you done any research?
Sorry, Marcus. You,
Okay,
sorry.
I've heard that statement so many times, but nobody has ever told me what it was that was special about it.
Well, apparently it was a mixture of Kodak EFSO 168 and MSS 0368. It was a special film with a special emulsion. That information is freely available on the internet.
So why isn't it commercially available?
Well, who wants to shoot film on the moon? Do you?
But Kodak,
I don't.
If it can be shown to be capable of...
It was designed for
Steve, don't interrupt, please. Steve, do not interrupt when I'm speaking. I don't interrupt you. Hear what I have to say.
Okay.
Listen to it.
Well, you asked
You're doing it again.
about the film, didn't you?
all right.
Steve,
Marcus.
don't interrupt. It's not necessary.
It's muted.
Okay, that's fine. So what I've been saying is that the vacuum of space and the vacuum is in low Earth orbit is very different from the vacuum on the moon. That affects photographic film. We've done the tests to prove it. We're going to do more tests at a harder vacuum. If those tests demonstrate, which I'm pretty sure they will, that photographic film is at the very least damaged, at the very worst destroyed, in the hard vacuum of space, the idea that photographs were taken on the lunar surface with cameras which were not protected, there was no protection on any of the Hasselblad cameras against the vacuum, let alone against the radiation, but that's another story.
I'm being patient here.
Then we have to conclude that the photographs taken on the lunar surface were not taken on the lunar surface, they were taken here on Earth.
Yeah, but this is nonsense that you keep repeating to support your narrative when you know that you used box standard E100 film for your tests. Unless you can get hold of some of the exact special film, which is a mix of EFSO 168 and MSS 0368, the special film and the special emulsion, your tests are worthless, aren't they? And the Hasselblad cameras had significant
Kelly had the special
had significant modifications.
The film
metal
didn't have
case.
this.
That they had, they had a silver coating or finish on them to reflect the sunlight.
Can I add something here, because I remember it very clearly from that. Hey, Patrick Moore and Hayes P. Douglas Arnold,
Scott's just been wanting to throw up, presumably.
have they did actually. This has been discussed. It was in an interview where the Kodak did not use special film.
Yes,
It was the actual film was used. Douglas Arnold actually states exactly what kind of film it used, because he actually has a reel of it. He has a reel, and it's
March to the moon.
Why does NASA, Hasselblad, and Kodak all say it was a special film?
Since when have they been saying that? Since when have they been saying that?
It's all on the internet. There's loads of information on the internet. You do no research, do you?
Well, it may have
You just form an opinion and you keep repeating it as truth. You're like Donald Trump. You know, if you say rubbish enough times, it becomes the truth. That's your philosophy, isn't it?
But if you rhetoric enough,
You keep saying rubbish all the time,
Well, it is.
trading it. You could just say,
I just told you what type of film I used.
well, I know what I'm talking about. No, you don't. We've done 3 searches, you, if not more.
What film did you use for your test?
And by interrupting all the time, you're demonstrating the weakness of your argument.
No, I'm not.
Prepare to discuss it.
What film did you use for your test?
The same film
Simple question.
NASA used
We bought
is their test from their own PDF files.
did you not look at the Atlas website, Steve? It's all on there. The experiment
All of the film listed.
Yeah, and it's
listed.
you used off the shelf film, didn't you?
No, we did not use off the shelf film. We used ESTAR film as stated by NASA from their documents, the same film types. And you can see the same film types if you go to March to the Moon, okay, because you like to be on the internet. Go to March to the Moon, and under each of the photographs, it shows the camera, the lens that was used, and the type of film that was used on each of them. And there's about 5 different films that they were actually using. Okay, then for the DAC camera, they're using the same ESTAR type film base on it.
Yeah.
Level 1, the filters, there was no filter for infrared. There was no filter on the camera or the lens for UV radiation. And you realize the difference between the UV radiation when you're below the Van belts, when you're in the Earth, okay, it's only 3% of what is when you're reaching full sunlight. So it wouldn't need UV radiation protection, and the film did not have it. The first UV
won't go through
for film
camera.
was
Quiet.
1875.
Brother Steve.
And I have the documents to prove it. All of the documents on the film. I've got the file open right now with everyone you want to discuss. Okay? All the different film types, the magazines, everything. I have them all right here in front of me.
And the vacuum chamber used in this experiment, I think, was it 2 torr or something like that? It was actually less. I think it's far less. I mean, Scott, I know you talk about the vacuum on the moon is like 12 torr, which is greater than the Large Hadron Collider.
I have the vacuum test from NASA, and they did an experiment, and it was their vacuum was just a little better than torr value of 10 to the minus 3. And they had damage. They had cracking, and they had and the emulsion lost.
Yeah, but what you got to bear in mind is that if you're a bunch of amateurs that are saying this, and NASA is saying something else. Who am I?
It all had hominum
We've got documents. You don't.
Yeah, I haven't seen them. I haven't seen
any document. It's your own imagination that's doing that.
No, it's not. I'm not seeing anything from you people at all in the way of evidence.
Well,
I'm hearing a lot of drivel, but I'm not seeing any evidence.
Steve, what evidence would you put forward to demonstrate that man has landed on the moon?
The evidence for that is overwhelming. Okay. Do you have access to the internet? Just go take a look at it.
Okay, what evidence would you
Do you have access to the internet?
I'm
going to show you a little access to the internet. Here's the study right here. Here's the file. here's the file number, okay, that you want to get from 1966, right here, on their film testing, right here. And it shows that the actual film itself cracked, okay, and the emulsion was done. And here's all the stuff on it. It's got radiation and everything else on it.
Where are the results for the film they actually used in 1969?
This is testing done before that. They didn't develop anything. There is, you realize that the emulsion has never been modified. Okay? The emulsion film has not been modified since its invention.
If NASA
the attempt to harden an emulsion for transportation was to freeze it down to 190 degrees Celsius. Okay? That did not happen. Okay? But here's the document right here.
Yeah, from 1966.
From 66. Well, this is the last testing they did.
Don't you think they would have got it right in 3 years?
Which is so many documents
There's
indicating
no other files.
If NASA, Hasselblad, and Kodak said they modified the cameras and made a special film for use on the moon, I'm inclined to believe that. I'm not inclined to believe you.
Well, maybe did they say this after, for example, the Dark Moon book was published, Steve?
I have no idea what that is, mate.
Right. Well, it's very important, right? Because I think it was 1999 that book came out, and that was the one where Douglas Arnold was interviewed, explaining how he had a roll of Kodak film, which Kodak had given him.
Douglas Arnold.
He's an astrophotographer. He's an astronomer and photographer. He's a friend of Patrick Moore, and he actually has a reel of the film, which is standard Kodak. He said it was so much ASA. He said it's
if he's got a roll of the film and it's standard film, it's not the same film, is it?
But Kodak gave him it.
That.
Kodak gave
look, okay, look, just forget it. It's not going to go anywhere, is it? I believe NASA, Hasselblad, and Kodak. That you want to maintain this ridiculous narrative you've been pushing for years. Let's ask you a simple question.
Your concession is noted, Steve. Carry on. Whoever wants to.
Let's ask Marcus a simple question here. On one of these episodes of this, whatever it is, you said that it was impossible for a radio amateur to pick up the transmissions from Apollo because radio hams only operate on long wave. It's ridiculous. That's pretty much your actual words. Why do you say something like that when you could Google it and find that radio amateurs operate from long wave up into through VHF, UHF into microwaves, and you could find that out in 2 minutes? Why would you say something like that?
But were those same amateur radio operators operating in the frequency that NASA were transmitting at?
Well, if they heard it, obviously.
Well, they say that.
That's a circular argument.
Yeah. Where's the recording?
What I'm asking is why you would feel the need to say that radio amateurs only operate on long wave, when it's very obviously untrue.
Well, we want to hear your recordings that you've had.
I'm not interested in what you want, Scott. I just want to hear what Marcus has to say.
I was saying that amateur radio operators or ham radio operators operate on long wave and VHF.
No, I've actually made a video showing you in a video clip saying radio amateurs only operate on long wave. It's ridiculous. Why would you say that?
Because that's what I found the information to be correct.
It's not correct. It wasn't correct in 1969. It's not correct now. You could have found out what bands amateur radio operators operate on in 2 minutes on the internet. You couldn't even be bothered to do 2 minutes of research.
So your argument is back to radio waves, and I just showed you a thing showing that they bounce off the atmosphere.
Yeah, but you don't understand.
Okay,
You're looking at Scott. HF radio does bounce off the atmosphere.
That just trashes your video, your argument, everything.
You're making yourself look like a moron.
Zoe,
You are.
Steve, none of that. Please.
I never said he was a moron. I said he's making himself look like a moron.
That's
Just another question here for you, Marcus. Another question here for you, Marcus. You showed on a presentation for Ben Emling Jones, Dreaming Saucers. You were doing a presentation on the fake moon landing. You showed a picture of Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong inside the lunar module. And your comment was, this was supposed to have been taken after Buzz Aldrin's moonwalk. This is a lie. This picture was taken before they even reached the moon. Now, why would you say something like that?
I don't recall saying that because I know perfectly well when that picture was taken.
I did a video clip showing you saying exactly that and showing those two pictures. And Ben still has that on his channel.
Of course they were. I showed those pictures to demonstrate what the two astronauts would look like inside the lunar module.
But your comment was, NASA say that this was taken just after Buzz Aldrin got back from a moonwalk. That is a lie. You were trying to catch NASA in a lie, as usual. You then went on to say this picture was taken before they even reached the moon. They are your words.
Now, I'm referring to another picture here. I'm referring to the two pictures
You were standing in front of those two pictures when you said it.
So we'd have to watch the video to check this over.
Why would you say that?
I'm glad that you take so much interest in what I say. And I'm glad that you watch Ben's Solstice conference. And I hope you learned something because a lot of people claimed that they did.
And I still haven't heard why you said it.
I can't be
Hey guys, I gotta take another call here, so I'm gonna.
Stay wise, very much. Stay wise. Bye.
Thanks very much, Scott. It's good to have you on the show, mate.
Bye-bye.
Okay,
speak to you soon.
Marcus, I just want to say the video you did with Bart was incredible. That the ending was a real cliffhanger.
It was.
Bart
and the can't recognize
Ben, I don't know if you saw it or not, Ben, but and Neil, but the two of them are talking together, and Bart went off on the end of the world and the signs for the end of the world and when it will happen and how it will happen. And all of a sudden the screen froze and he disappeared.
I'll have to see that.
Leaving Marcus going, Are you there, Bart? Are you there, Bart? Like he's the last man left on Earth or something like
He's
that.
raptured.
Real cliffhanger.
I'll have to
You gotta see that to believe it. Hey, take care, guys.
Cheers, Scott. See you then.
Thanks, Scott.
Bye-bye. Bye, Scott.
I did my own interview with Bart. It was really good. I did a good interview with Bart myself. He's a good guy. He's not here today, unfortunately. But so
can we get back to the question? Why would you say that, Mark?
So sorry. Say what?
This picture was taken before they even reached the moon, and you were standing in front of a picture of Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong in the lunar module. I think maybe you should take a look at some of the videos on my channel.
Anyway, go back and re-watch all these videos, Steve.
Answer the question, Marcus.
Yeah, I know what you're referring to. And after I showed that picture of the two of them in the lunar module, which was taken by a National Geographic photographer during the training exercises, that's why you see two of them in the same picture. The next picture was me showing Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, who were photographed by each other in the lunar module. And if you look at the sequence of the photographs and you look where the original photograph appears in the sequence, you'll find that it was taken on the way to the moon, which is why I said it.
Well, there you go. You've just said it was taken on the way to the moon.
Yeah, but
so you're just saying that they went to the moon, aren't you?
I'm referring to a different picture.
Yes, right. Regardless of whether it's a different picture or not, you just said it was taken on the way to the moon. You just said it there again yourself.
It was taken on the way to the moon.
Did he just say this was taken on the way to the moon?
It was.
Well, I think he was used meant to be. That's what NASA claim. I think NASA, Marcus sometimes, and people, we all do this. We sometimes say, we admit that NASA claims.
Well, they went to the moon. He sometimes just keeps telling us so. It's so just that.
Steve, you're gish galloping now. This is called gish galloping.
Anybody with an IQ bigger than a cheese sandwich can see what's going on.
Well, your IQ's not much bigger than your shoe size, is it?
Well, I seem to be doing very well against you, Marcus, don't I?
No, well, you're not actually, Steve. You're not. You
just said the picture was taken on the way to the moon, and your whole argument is they never went to the moon.
You're making fraudulent statements.
No, I'm not. Well, wait, so we can replay this, can't we?
You're also. I mean, I've had this discussion.
I'm
with
not
you,
making
Steve,
fraudulent statements at all.
To discredit what
You just said it was taken on the way to the moon. They were your own words. You said it 2 minutes ago.
Yes, it was. That's you pick what's the photographs. It doesn't mean to say they got to the moon. I'm saying that's what NASA claimed they did.
Maybe they were in low Earth orbit, Steve. Steve, look, you and I have this. This is actually something you and I have discussed before, or in the comment section of my channel, or maybe yours. All right. We often say Marcus, I, and many other people often say this. On the way to the moon, on the moon. We use these terms when it's almost like an unspoken implication that this is part of NASA's claim. You see, what you're doing is you're demanding answers from Marcus for a question which you have to go and rewatch the video or whatever it is, and you're also it's about semantics, Steve. You are nitpicking about semantics.
When you're making statements like that, they should be taken at face value.
Oh.
If you mean, so why didn't Marcus then say this, after the Buzz Aldrin walked back to the lunar module, when he said this is a lie, this was taken before they even reached the moon. Why didn't he just say, this was taken in the studio back on Earth?
Because we have to caveat that with every single sentence. We have to caveat it. It's the implication is obvious.
That's just a get out of jail free card statement.
On the contrary.
All of you make these statements, and it's a slip of the subconscious. They're on their way to the moon. Another thing you said, Marcus. Another thing you said, Marcus, was that in the same presentation on dreaming sources, you can go back and watch it yourself, or I've done a video on my channel about it showing you saying it. You were talking about von Braun and co. being Nazis, and you said Operation Paperclip, etc., etc. They were Nazis. They were the Germans that got America to the moon. They are your words, Marcus.
Yes, and the problem with that is
exactly. Why would you say that? If your contention is no one ever went to the moon, why would you make a statement like von Braun and co. with the Germans? You got America to the moon.
I'm sorry that you've got this attitude, because it is so
You mean because you're losing the argument?
I'm not losing the argument, because you've only got to say these things to show that what I say is correct. It has to be correct.
Well, von Braun and co. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, von Braun and co. were the Germans that got America to the moon.
You're just repeating.
I'm just surprised to hear you say it, because you've always said that they never went.
You're not doing yourself any favors, Steve. You really are not. You're digging yourself into a hole, and the advice is, when in a hole, stop digging.
You're repeating the same
I think that would be my advice to you, Marcus.
You can say whatever you like.
Oh, by intention.
I don't doubt it for a minute.
There was something else that I thought was quite interesting, and I've done a clip of you saying this as well.
I hope you didn't mean an original point.
Your presentation to the British Interplanetary Society.
Oh, here we go. Come on, let's hear it.
Where you said there was a few people around that thought that they never went to the moon, but you didn't happen to be one of them. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. Do you know who asked me the question?
Does it? It doesn't matter, does it?
It does matter. It's very.
If it wouldn't make any difference if I asked you the question. It was the response that was the important part.
No.
And the response was, you are not one of them.
You got it so completely wrong, Steve.
Well, I showed a clip of you saying that in your own words on my channel. Take a look at it, Marcus.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that you've promoted me so widely. It really helps the point to make, because people will say, did you say that? Let's find out a bit more about this, Marcus Allen. And they can go to Apollo Detectives, and they can see what I'm saying there.
And they'll see that I'm right.
Effect, Steve. Such effect.
All the comments that I've made about the Apollo Detectives, as you flatteringly call yourselves, are correct.
You've just repeated the same point over and over, and I've told you before, Steve. It's a semantic nitpicking point. And it shows you don't understand really the kind of way we express ourselves.
I think it's important.
It's not a subconscious slip.
If you've got a group of people that are saying this is all rubbish and it's all fake, it never happened, despite the overwhelming evidence and the moon rocks and all the film and all the transcripts and all the engineering and all the people that are involved with it.
NASA.
Sorry, this was taken before they got to the moon.
That's
Go down and go with the Germans that got America to the moon.
talking over him deliberately because he's so full of himself, he can't listen to what anybody else has to say, let alone understand what anybody else has to say.
Neil, I just sent you an SMS. All right, mate.
So,
Gotcha, Ben.
Thanks.
Poor Neil's probably fallen asleep.
See, Steve,
Or he's out chasing those fairies at the bottom of the garden.
very funny, Steve. You see, we're trying
Goes
to.
to credibility, Ben, goes to credibility.
Do we have to, like, every time we talk about these things, like, we have to always say, well, they got them to the moon, but we think they didn't. And we think they didn't after every sentence, because then that
Well, no,
provides
well,
stilted
as I just said, Ben, you know, if that was the case, Marcus would have said, you know, this picture, this is a lie. This picture was taken when, you know, the lunar module on the ground, the film set, whatever. Not this was taken before they even reached the moon.
I think you'll find, Steve, if you listen carefully to what I say, not just assume that what I'm saying is incorrect and therefore not listen to it. If you listen carefully to what I say, I do make the comment at the beginning of the Dreaming Sources talk when I say, I don't believe they went to the moon, but in order to stop interrupting the flow of conversation, say it is alleged that they landed on the moon and all that.
Yeah.
But
You're dodging the
We're
point.
going to have to move on to Neil in a minute.
The point is, why not say it was filmed on the ground? Why say this was taken on the way to before they even reached the moon?
I'm developing that talk now as we speak.
And
So you'll have lots more to criticize me for.
Well, I'll put down
The
there
more
for a
you
minute.
criticize me, the more people will want to hear what I actually have to say.
Do you think that will stop me criticising you?
No, I don't.
I think the more people that hear what I have to say about what you have to say, the more people will realise how ridiculous all this is.
well, they'll be the judge of that, Steve.
Yes.
They will be the judge of that. In my opinion, you know, we've shown ourselves to be much more reasonable than you have. You have not really made many serious points, in my view. And
Well, I have. I've made
as
many.
we do when we discussed this
Look,
before, don't we, Steve?
Can we? Oh, okay, all right. So first of all, Scott Henderson claimed this nonsense about satellites and reflections and all this sort of stuff, and I made the point that any of you could Google geostationary satellites and you could see where he said that you couldn't get it more than 500 miles out in space or something. Any of you could Google where the geostationary satellites are, where the communication satellites are, where the television satellites are. You'll see they're 23,000 miles out in space. Microwave signals go out of them and come back all the time. So that is a valid point. Anyone can check and verify. I think that's a fair.
Moonrise.
So that's proved Scott was talking out of his side.
No,
Steve, we've done that.
Up here.
We've done
Nice
that.
piece of moon rock. Nice piece of moon rock. I'm not supposed to have it. Civilians aren't supposed to own pieces of moon rock. I've got one here. What are we going to do about that? Why didn't you get it? Oh,
Well, if you post it to me, Marcus, I have some university friends that can tell you whether it's moon rock or not.
I know it's a piece of moon rock.
All right. Now, what we're going to do is, sorry, Marcus, if Marcus, is it all right if we come on to Neil? Is that all right? Because Neil has a presentation he wants to provide, and then I think we'll have to call it a night, or a night in Steve's case, a day for the rest of us. But Neil, what would you like to talk about?
Okay, bear with me just a second. Right, I'm just going to share this screen momentarily, but I'll come on to other things as well.
Yeah, I need to practice a screen sharing lark, I think.
Okay, so on the left there, this is from Apollo 15. Now, this is a very interesting page from the All This website, and I would recommend. Yeah, I know what you're going to say.
That just oozes credibility.
The All This website,
That's Neil point.
don't go and visit the All This website. It's complete try. Well, actually, it's quite interesting for those that want to listen and take in things and actually learn a few things. It's actually quite an interesting read. So I'll just carry on talking over Steve, and then he'll have his few minutes and he can talk about this. So this is the alleged Genesis rock, from what I understand of this interesting document. It's all about the moon rocks and how supposedly they've come from the moon. But there's a lot of interesting things that maybe is not commonly known, is that the Russians wanted to share, for instance, their found samples or discovered samples from their lunar missions were, remote missions, etc., where they've brought back moon dust or moon rocks and things like that, and they had a kind of an agreement with the US to actually share their findings. Now, the Russians happily handing over their moon dust to the Americans, but the Americans were apparently very, very reluctant to hand over theirs, and it took a long, long time before the Americans finally handed over something. Now, Apollo 15 went searching for this this apparent Genesis rock, and hey presto, they just happened to find it. And even Dave Scott said it was just waiting there, as if it was waiting for us. You know, it was just happened to be in front of them. My God, how about that? Now, could it have been placed there by the stagehand wearing these tennis-style shoes? Now, you can't argue the fact that it's a pirouetting astronaut or anything like that, because here is plenty of evidence of the types of shoes that the astronauts wear, and you've seen them on all the missions. You know, you've seen Buzz Aldrin's, Neil Armstrong's shoe prints. All the other astronauts have got these shoe prints, but suddenly we've got a different tread here, and that's a very interesting find. So either they brought a spare tennis shoe with them and just threw it on the ground, or someone else happened to be walking around to possibly place that there for them. Or
it's just a footprint over a footprint.
Well, it doesn't look like that to me. It doesn't look like that to me, because otherwise a footprint over a footprint would actually destroy the previous footprint, as evidence here, for instance. You see?
Yeah, but they're obviously walking around in this area, aren't they? And they've got the shoe pattern is lines, and if you put your foot down and then you rotate slightly, you're going to get a pattern like that, aren't you?
Here we go, the ballerina astronaut. It's always that same thing.
That's the most logical answer.
The most logical answer is that it shouldn't actually really be there. The most logical answer. And also, when you read this article, you start to see the logic. Hang on. You start to see the logic of why that footprint is there, because the American samples of moon rock are actually turning out to be very Earth-like. If you read this article, it'll tell you all in detail. Now, I'm not a geologist. Fair enough, I'm not a geologist, but they put it in a lot of layman's terms and explain everything for you. Now, whilst we're there, I shall get onto something else. I want to show you something else. Just now, I want to know why, for instance, now this is obviously from, I say obviously, I'm informing you, I put it Apollo 18. It's not actually Apollo 18, that's the sequence of photos. These are zoomed in shots from
Apollo 17. Apollo 18, that would explain it all, wouldn't it then?
Well, no, it's not Apollo 18. I'm just numbering it. If you actually look at my sequence here, Apollo 16, Apollo 17, Apollo 18, it's just the number of sequences I've put together. So I want to know why NASA have been very liberal here with the use of Photoshop, because you can see here, this is that, that is that. This is actually an enlargement of this. I could look like sandcastles, that and that. And then we got a thing with a handle there. Why is that with a handle? And why is this with a handle? I mean, some very piece of moon rocks. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I call them the Apollo ions. Why, if you're going to research Genesis rocks, didn't you pick up these things with handy handles on at the same time?
They wanted to play curling with them.
Yeah. Any ideas, Steve?
I don't know. I'd have to look at the original pictures. I can't see them in sufficient
detail. Go
detail.
to the panoramic of the, I think it's, I'm not sure the crater, but it's the panoramic of Apollo 17. There's also some from Apollo 16, and you have to zoom in. But the best place to find them is actually around all the craters, because that's where you find all the junk, as I call it. Sometimes you find them far out on the lunar surface, but it's just very interesting. You've got these Apollo rocks with handles on. You've got these footprints that don't belong to the Apollo astronauts. And then you've got these doubled up images. You've got these doubled up images that are clearly clone stamped in Photoshop. Now, there's no need for NASA to Photoshop their own backgrounds and clone rocks and things like that.
Well, what you got to bear in mind is that, you know, NASA are very clever people. Do you really think
To make
they would do anything that would be obviously, you know, raise questions? You think they would let that through? Do you?
Well, hang on. If they're very
That's
clever
a
people,
spot
why
on.
didn't they just hand over all their samples of moon dust and moon rock straight over to the Russians? They were actually
Well, because they work very hard for it.
Steve, are you arguing that because it looks more fake, that's evidence that it's not?
I'm not saying that it looks more fake. To be honest, I can't see it well enough to be able to comment on it.
Well, maybe NASA was just unlucky because, you know, as Jarrah said when he was on a previous show,
you know,
they went all the way to the moon. They picked up an Earth meteorite and brought it back. They're very unlucky. You know how rare Earth meteorites are on the moon?
I know. Do you?
They're very extremely rare because Earth is very deep gravity well compared to the moon.
And where does that information come from, man?
Well, Jarrah had a presentation on a previous show which you've watched. I know you've watched it, haven't you? You've watched it, haven't you? And Marcus's piece of chocolate cake there is that
Jarrah's the guy that's telling us all that you know, space travel beyond low Earth orbit is impossible due to the Van Allen belts and cosmic and solar radiation. Yet he's begging to get a trip with SpaceX out to Mars.
he's just been
I'm disappointed he's not here. Actually, I'd love to ask him why he'd be so keen to sign up for a suicide mission.
well, maybe he can come on next time.
And the other thing I was going to ask him about was he did a calculation about how much radiation would be a human body would be presented with on one of these lunar missions, and his calculation. Am I still here? His calculation seemed to relate to an astronaut that had been peeled, his skin stretched out into a flat sheet, and presented with an aspect that will be maximum radiation in the Van Allen belts, had no protection from a spacesuit or from a spacecraft. I'd like to ask him about that calculation.
Well, he's not here. I don't have that information myself, but I'm sure he'll have an answer for you.
I'm sure he will, yeah. I find it to be just as ridiculous as the answers I've heard here today.
What's that chocolate brownie you've got there? Is it nice, Marcus, that chocolate brownie?
Well, chocolate brownie, this one.
Yeah. Yeah, does it taste nice? That's what it looks like to me.
No, not really, because it's moon rock and it's full of radioactivity, I'm told. But it's all gone away now, because obviously the moon is radioactive, which was what man said about the...
And it'd be good if we got the other luminary, Rasa, on here as well, the guy that says he's working on a secret free energy project for the Chinese government that produces 2 megawatts of power.
You do.
You know, and he announced that on a global social media platform.
Yeah.
If that was if that was true, he would have been dragged off to a re-education camp, and he would be there right now, being beaten with a rubber hose, probably.
I see that you follow everything said in the mainstream media about China and Russia.
Well, there are an awful lot of outlets telling the same story.
Of course they are.
And the biggest story would be if one of those outlets found out that the other outlets weren't telling the correct story. That would be the biggest story of all, wouldn't it?
That's not how it works, and you know that really well.
Of course it is. If someone could get a scoop like that, they would. They wouldn't hesitate.
What about Smedley Butler and what he said about the media? You know, I mean, we're going to be off topic here anyway, guys. But
you guys obviously know nothing whatsoever about any of the technology. You don't understand it. You don't understand the communications between the spacesuits. You know, with the Vox and all that sort of stuff. You got no clue.
So 2 + 2 = 5 because well, everyone believes that, and if anyone who says 2 + 2 = 4 just doesn't understand it. They just don't understand it, Steve.
I'm not saying anything that's not verifiable. And anybody that knows anything about it will know what I'm saying is correct.
You said
what you're saying is rubbish.
By the way, Neil, I'm recording this bit in case you want to use it. You see, the thing is like,
can I download this as well?
Yeah, of course. I just want to perhaps I want to make this point to the viewers. Actually, some people claim we're an echo chamber. I think now we've proved that we are not an echo chamber at all. If we didn't do it with Blue Earth thing, we've certainly done it with Steve Mumbling, I would say.
It took long enough, didn't it?
Well, Steve, we've asked you actually.
I mean, you've been sort of you lot put yourselves forward as space exploration experts. Now, I know orders of magnitude more about space exploration than all of you lot put together.
Yeah, but
And I would not call myself a space exploration expert by a very long chalk.
Well, you can make an argument about semantics as much as you like, but I mean, it's easy to say, oh, someone's clueless, or they don't know what they're talking about, or I know more than you do. But demonstrating that they're wrong, I was just making a point.
But that's exactly my point. When I was saying at the beginning with Scott, any of you right now while we're doing this could Google the Clark belt. Geostationary television satellites, geostationary communication satellites. And any of you will be able to tell me, man, when you read that, you're 23,000 miles out.
Do something about it.
You're 23,000 miles out.
It's not important.
It is, because
ironically,
Henderson is talking absolute bloody rubbish.
It doesn't. But
it's simple. Scott does not rubbish. Scott knows what he's talking about.
No, he doesn't. And the fact that you're backing him up tells everybody that knows anything about it that you know nothing about it.
Steve, it's very
ironic how this works.
It's very ironic, Steve, because when you mentioned that point about the geosynchronous satellite altitude, right? That was one of the few actual points you made. It's one of the few that and the microwave point with the atmosphere. Well, yeah, that was literally the only two things you said that were real rebuttals to Scott. He comes across. I think he comes across as far more reasonable than you do. So does Marcus.
Well, he didn't say that he tested a part of that flag, did he? For moisture content.
Oh, I don't know.
He's just looked at it and given an opinion. You can't do that. If you're putting forward a case for something and you're saying this is fact, this is what this is, you have to back it up. You can't just look at a camera and say, look at this flag, it's wet.
That's low-hanging fruit, I think, because it's impossible because the flag is the flag is somewhere.
And if you were real researchers, you would have contacted Annin in America, who made the flag. You would have asked them to send you a flag, and you would have doused it in water and then filmed it drying out. And said, look, we've replicated this here on Earth, which is where we say this was shot.
Well, Scott was saying
if it was shot on Earth, he could probably get a section of that. Probably get a section of the actual
with photographic film, isn't it? We've tested it. We've put it in vacuum chambers. We've proved.
Yeah, but it's the wrong film.
No, it's
the wrong film. It's meaningless. Your tests are nonsense.
No, our tests are valid.
Perfect. Didn't Scott show an emulsion film that he said had been tested in a vacuum chamber when in fact it had been tested on the outside of the ISS for a year? More misleading bloody nonsense from you lot.
No.
Yes.
It was tested on the outside of the ISS. Was real. And it showed damage to the space. And that's
because it had been out there for a year. And on one of the samples he showed had been out there for 4 years.
And the problem with that is what exactly?
Name one lunar mission that lasted 4 years. Or even 1 year.
Nobody's ever claimed they did. What a stupid argument to make.
Well, no, you're.
Well, Steve, what if someone put a piece of film on outside the ISS for like 14 days? Would you accept that as a proper experimental result?
Well, no, because Hasselblad and Kodak said they made a special film to work on the moon.
Well, we
probably unless you have a sample of that special film, you're pissing in the wind, aren't you?
No, because there was no special film, as you said. You're talking absolute rubbish. You don't know.
You think they would go to the? You
don't know what you're talking about.
You seen what happened?
Why don't you do a little bit of research and see what Hasselblad and Kodak have to say about it?
Yeah, I have. I know what they said about it. The film was not special.
What about the EFSO 168 and the MSSO 368? What about that?
Did they say that after Dark Moon was published or before Dark Moon was published?
I don't read that sort of rubbish.
Well, that's very convenient, I must say.
Why you're so uninformed about what we talk about.
Because Douglas Arnold, during the contemporary with the Apollo missions, Douglas Arnold and Patrick Moore were given samples of the film. It is standard Kodak ASA, and as Arnold very proudly shows it to people.
Yeah.
I think he's dead now, but he very proudly.
Yeah, and this Arnold guy is a fake moon guy, is he?
No, he's an astrophotographer who's good friends with Patrick Moore.
Yeah, but
BBC.
he supports the fake moon landing.
No. He's very opposed to it. In fact, he and Patrick Moore on April the 1st, sometime in the 90s, they actually did a special Sky at Night episode where they attempted to debunk the things that Marcus, Neil, and I talk about, and they failed.
Yeah, well, I'm inclined to believe Hasselblad and Kodak, not over you guys any day of the
Well,
week.
Jan Lundberg, Hasselblad, actually, have you seen the interview with him on what's it called? What Happened on the Moon?
So what does Hasselblad have to say about this classic Aldrin picture? Does it look to Jan Lundberg as though the subject was lit?
Yes, it seems like he's standing in the spotlight. And I can't explain that. That escapes me. Why? So maybe you have to find Armstrong and ask him.
Because he was interviewed before. He was interviewed earlier, and he explained that the camera was designed to use normal film.
This Arnold guy, just so you know, he's the managing director of Kodak UK. Aside from his other things, so he does know what he's talking about, and he was representing Kodak.
He's very close to the space program. He's very, very in time with the space program. He's interviewed in What Happened on the Moon, and he actually states specifically, this is normal film. I've got a reel of it here. It was from the same batch they gave Apollo. It's like a souvenir. He was given it as a souvenir from the same batch that they gave to Apollo. Just because obviously it's not the same reel, but it's from the same batch.
And this is the film you tested, is it, Marcus?
No, we tested the S-Star-based film that we bought specifically for the test.
So it's a different film.
No, it's not a different film. It was the same batch of film. It was actually quite hard to get hold of because there's not much of them around anymore. But we got the correct film for the test. There's no point in doing the test without the correct film.
Well, exactly. That's why I think.
Well, Steve, now you're deviating and mixing points, because you actually said a while ago that the specific film that Kodak used in the moon landing was a special film. Then we explained that Kodak actually didn't use special film. Then you asked what film we used for the experiment, for the vacuum chamber experiment. Then you said, oh no, that's a different kind. It's not the same kind of film. So you're mixing.
No, what I'm saying is, Marcus hasn't got a sample of the film that you're talking about, has he been?
Yeah, well, they don't make it anymore. But we use a similar kind of film. You use a similar kind of modern.
You can't get an off-the-shelf film and say this is the effect you're going to get on the moon when they used a completely different film.
Well, you see, this is what I mean by you're mixing.
That's like me saying
if a normal kind of film can work on the moon, why did Kodak make special film then? You see, you're mixing points.
Kodak made special film to work on the moon.
Yeah, the only part that was special about it was that it was a thinner film, so to get more in the magazine in the.
So now you're admitting it's a special film.
No, I'm saying it was special because it was thinner, not because.
Yeah, and it's probably got some other specialities as well, isn't it? It's probably got
No, because
I think so.
That's what you will say to support your.
And that's what you will say to support your ridiculous fake moon landing nonsense. You won't admit anything, any fact. Anything has to be sort of distorted, and it's all. Yeah, there's just.
Oh, come on, Steve.
Yes, Steve.
You're not splitting hairs on this one.
Mm.
Yeah, but as I said, you're trying to prove something.
Yeah,
you're not going the right way about it.
No, but so are you. You're trying to prove that a government agency with a track record for lying made an achievement. And you're saying they made that achievement. That's a positive.
I'm not trying to prove anything. I think NASA have proved it over and over and over again. I'm just saying that I look at what I see from NASA, and I look at what I see from you, and I think what I see from NASA, it makes perfect sense and all looks fine to me.
Well,
what I see from you is a lot of misleading dribble.
Well, that's your opinion is your choice, but the fact of the matter is that it is. I'm glad you accept anyway that NASA are making a positive claim. It's not just a burden of proof kind of thing where
for goodness sake, I mean, the ticker tape parades, you know, and all this, you know, the space race, and you seriously believe that the Russians would not have said that the Americans faked it?
Do you know the doctor who invented lobotomies? The doctor who invented lobotomies won the Nobel Prize, Steve. Do you know that?
The Americans built a number of Apollo spacecraft because they weren't expecting the first one to succeed. And if it hasn't, another one. And if it actually they built another one.
We're not disputing they built them. You can see one of them in a museum today. The Saturn V.
You know, I hear this bloody nonsense. The only thing Marcus can ever say is that the Russians were cooperating. You know, that's why they don't spill the beans. But he can't say anything else because it destroys his ridiculous narrative.
It doesn't.
How many regime changes have there been in Russia? You think the Russians would keep it quiet now, do you?
Yeah. I mean, you do have a vested interest in keeping it quiet. They have a vested
in cloud cuckoo land. They don't have a vested.
One of the counter arguments given to this a lot is, you know, that this was originally done to dupe the Soviets, to say we had better rocket equipment than they did. And one of the arguments given is, well, if the Soviets would have to have figured it out by now, or the Russians now, or the Chinese would have to have figured out what we did by now. And so why haven't they mounted some kind of counterattack or some kind of campaign to expose some of this stuff? And same thing with 9/11 and other events like that of similar political intrigue. And he goes off in a different direction about, you know, who our real enemies may or may not be and all that. But I liken it to competing magicians in Vegas. Competing magicians in Vegas don't ever reveal each other's tricks. That's just, you just don't do that. And it's not because you have such incredible respect for the competing magician. It's because you have a respect for the trade, and you have a respect for the methods employed. And you know that if I give up that method that guy used, I can't use it. So why would I ever give up this method, even if it is by my opponent? Only under the worst circumstances where you're backed into a corner would it make sense to give away somebody else's methods. So I think that's an important thing to remember sometimes when we look at political intrigue and go, well, if that really happened, why aren't the Chinese talking about it? Or why aren't the Russians exposing that? Or why isn't Edward Snowden or somebody saying something about it? And sometimes it's as simple as they don't want to give away the other guy's magic trick because they might be using it for something else. So
interesting keeping it quiet. It's absolute nonsense. People in Australia, people in England, people all over the world would have to keep it quiet.
Have you ever read national series?
Just listen for a second. No. The Americans, there's no way the Americans would allow the Russians to hold such a big secret over them.
You believe that?
Absolutely, because if that was the case, at any time the Russians have got this sword of Damocles hanging over America, we can tell the world that you faked the moon landing. If the Americans would have just said, look, you know, we can't do it, they would not have that sword of Damocles hanging over them. It makes no sense. No sense whatsoever.
It may not make sense to you, Steve, but it makes sense to a lot of other people.
Yeah, a lot of other people that live in cloud cuckoo land.
Steve, have you ever read
not anyone that lives it, not anybody that lives in the real world.
Have you ever read National Suicide by Anthony Sutton?
No, suicide's not a topic.
No, it's not. It's not about suicide. It's called National Suicide. It's actually it's an analysis of Cold War politics by someone called. He was at the University of Nottingham. A guy called Anthony Sutton. He was a professor at the University of Nottingham. It's worth reading now because it gives you. It doesn't specifically mention the moon landings, but it gives you a background about how the Cold War was being, quote unquote, fought privately behind the scenes among the statesmen involved compared to how it was presented to the public. And when you read that book, even though it doesn't mention it gives you a background of how something like the collaboration of both sides or supposed sides in the Cold War worked.
Why do you think there has never been a quid pro quo fake Russian moon landing?
Because they were more sensible. Because right, okay. Listen to this, Steve. The person who was tracking the Russian craft, because they didn't have the deep space network that America had, was Sir Bernard Lovell at Jodrell Bank Radio Telescope near Manchester, in the central England. And he was cooperating with the Russians because he had to find out what they were going to be doing and when they needed to be tracked. He was done with the full knowledge of both the American and the British governments. And Bernard Lovell visited Russia on several occasions, obviously to meet up with the people he was dealing with. And he asked them outright, he said, when are you going to be sending men to the moon? This was before Apollo. And the Russians said, when we can ensure their safe return due to the dangers of radiation. They would have assumed that America knew the same dangers and would have been able to overcome them. And they were fascinated to know how they did it. We know the Americans didn't overcome the dangers of radiation. They still haven't overcome them. The Russians...
all the radiation doses received by the crews are publicly available.
Just wait.
This is rubbish.
You can say whatever rubbish you like, but that was...
You've got no idea, Marcus.
You're not addressing...
The Russians gave Jodrell Bank all the information about that particular spaceflight because they wanted the West to know they could do it. And the West wasn't taking any notice of their space missions to the moon.
That's what you say. That's your opinion.
Just to research it. It's fact.
The Russians were well ahead of the Americans in most space travel prior to Apollo. Zond 5 was sent on a mission to the moon, and it had on board several live animals, tortoises we'd call them. And they were alive, so the assumption was that radiation wasn't quite as severe as they were expecting. But what they were not talking about was that tortoises can withstand far greater levels of radiation than humans can. So of course they were alive.
Some animals can tardigrade. Israel just sent tardigrades to the moon.
You don't think people that are engineering a spacecraft to go to the moon are going to engineer it to be resistant to that kind of radiation? Is that what you seriously believe?
Oh, that's not radiation which can harm humans. They're going to have to engineer it to that point. But because they never went to the moon, they didn't have to show what they
were tracked to the moon. They were recorded on the moon. You know, signals were detected from them moving around on the moon.
Who recorded them on the moon? Who did it? Where's the recording?
Well, you know, I would expect they're out there.
Steve,
I can't remember. I do remember reading about it. It might have even been Jodrell Bank.
Oh dear, come on, you've got to do that.
No, I don't.
Yes, you do.
Because if you actually look at what they did, you know, what they built, why would you think that was incapable of going to the moon? You've got no idea about space radiation. Why don't you just admit it?
What about cosmic radiation?
Yeah, but cosmic radiation, solar radiation and all this sort of stuff, it's not strong enough to penetrate a spacecraft.
But except when they're opening the door. And they're leaving the door open and going out for 10 hours or whatever, walking around on the lunar surface.
Yeah, but if you look
really didn't know when they were planning these missions.
If you look at the levels, they're not levels of concern.
They're breathing the dust in. Once they're
not in a spacesuit, they're not.
When they've got out the suit, you've got all that space dust or moon dust on their suit, and they're dusting it down inside the spacecraft, and it's floating around inside the spacecraft.
You were there, you saw all this, did you, Neil?
And once they're reaching back up to orbit, all that lunar dust that's sitting on the deck of the lunar module is then floating around inside the craft, and they're not supposedly breathing it in, I guess.
Well, I don't know.
I don't know. To seal the house.
Well, it may be. Apparently, the lunar dust is pretty abrasive.
And they're breathing it in.
Perhaps it just sticks to the sides and sticks to the floor. And it doesn't actually float around. And it doesn't float around inside the spacecraft. There's another explanation for it.
Scott has just sent us this. Hang on.
What's that?
If it's abrasive and it's sticking to surfaces, it's not going to float around, is it? Regardless of whether it's gravity.
They dusted it off them.
How do you know? Were you there? Did you see that?
No, but it's a logical thing. It's a
what if they didn't dust it off them? What if they left it clinging to the spacesuits and just took the spacesuits off?
Well, even then, some would come off it.
I've just been sent a PDF by Scott, which is Oh, what's this now? A satellite sim, all files.
Is this still recording? Is it?
Well, yeah, I thought well, I pressed record because I thought we were having such a discussion. It may actually be a good. What's it? Oh, yes, I'll replace that.
Billions of years of cosmic radiation on all of that lunar surface, and then and they're bringing the rock back with them.
But it's not. It doesn't work like that. It's not residual.
Also, it's a pity Scott's not here, actually, because not only would the dust maybe cause health problems for the astronauts, it would also make it very, very difficult to seal the hatches on the actual spacecraft. And this is essential.
You don't know that.
Well, as I said, it's Scott's speciality.
Yeah, but his speciality is being wrong about everything and being completely clueless about everything. That's his speciality.
About the space stuff.
Quite unnecessary, Scott. Quite unnecessary.
That is that's not an argument. Saying people are clueless.
You know, I mean,
arguments.
You're going to be a recipe for a souffle. I might be inclined to take his word for it, you know, but the rest of it, forget it. It's just nonsense.
Well, that's not an argument. That's not an argument.
But it's not.
Well, it is.
No. Well, so saying someone is clueless is an argument.
As I said before, why don't one of you just Google where the satellites are and just tell Scott, give him a bit of an education?
Oh, do stuff about
that again.
Do a bit of research on HF propagation and microwave propagation. Give him an education. Tell him the microwaves go through the ionosphere.
Yeah.
HF
because those are the only 2 points you actually made in your discussion with him. You keep coming back to them.
And he won't yield because he's got no bloody idea what he's looking at.
So of all the things that the Human Research Program is investigating, the biological consequences of radiation exposure is one of the major ones. Some of the reasons for that is that the health consequences following radiation exposure are very complex processes. It's difficult to quantify exactly how the radiation is interacting with tissue, and then it's even more complicated to try to quantify and determine what the long-term outcomes are going to be in terms of things like carcinogenesis, central nervous system effects, and detriment to the central nervous system.
The primary means by which radiation affects cells is by damaging their DNA. You can get breaks in the strands in the double helix, you can knock bases out, and the cell will make an attempt to repair that damage. Sometimes it's effective, sometimes it's not, and sometimes it'll actually get repaired, but in an error-prone fashion, so it's what we call misrepaired. So anything that sets into the genome in that way is a mutation. And the accumulation of mutations can potentially lead to cancer and take a non-cancerous cell, a normal cell, and make it transformed into a cancerous one. So that's a big concern.
So on Earth, there's a couple characteristic things that are different from space. One of them is that the type of radiation we experience on Earth is generally what we refer to as low LET radiation, things like gamma rays and X-rays. We also have the protective shielding of the Earth's magnetic field and the atmosphere, which shields a great deal of the radiation. And then finally, we have things like radiation protection concepts such as time, shielding, and distance. So we can reduce the time of exposure on Earth, we can reduce the distance from the radiation sources, and we can reduce the exposure through shielding. In space, a lot of those things are very different. So we have a very complex radiation field that includes things like protons and all the particles on the periodic table of elements. They're coming in at energies that are approaching the speed of light, and they're difficult to shield against. And they're always there. So the concept of time really doesn't make sense because you can't reduce the exposure in space except perhaps getting to Mars faster. You can't really reduce the distance at all because the radiation is everywhere. And shielding concepts for galactic cosmic rays are very difficult because of the energies involved.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank all of you for this extremely unusual and entertaining stream. I mean, it's been frustrating, I know, for some of us, but I think the viewers are going to enjoy it. And it has been, you know what I think, who won the argument, who lost them, but the viewers can make their own minds up about that. The viewers can make their own mind up. I want to say a big thank you to you all. So Marcus, tell us about how they can find out more about you, Nexus Magazine and things like that. How do they learn more?
Nexus Magazine. Go to your local newsagent or...
Right.
If you like science fiction stories.
No, great, Steve. Yeah, very funny. So yeah, this you can get. You can subscribe to it. I'm a regular subscriber.
To Apollo 13.
There will be a link in the description box where you can find out more about Nexus Maggie. Steve, do you have any publications, YouTube channel, anything like that you'd like people to look at?
Well, there is a YouTube channel called Steve Mumbling.
It's just simply Steve Mumbling. Put his name in and you'll find it. You'll if you want to hear both, it's always good to hear both sides of the story, I find. So go. I always watch it. So I want to say a big thank you, Neil. Of course, you do a radio show too, don't you? Another radio show.
Yes, you'll be doing it soon, Ben, on the Paranormal Peep Show. So it's going to been a good recording today, and we look forward to chatting to you soon on that.
Definitely, we're recording tomorrow, so it's a busy weekend for me. And with UFOs being shot down and everything like that, it's going to be great. It's quite an eventful weekend. But I want to thank all you gentlemen for joining, and Scott earlier on, of course, who's now left, had to leave early. But thank you very much to Scott Henderson as well. Thank you all of you for watching on Neil Geddes-Ward's channel on mine, Hapanmo TV, if you're watching there. And I'd like to wish you all a pleasant evening, and keep watching the skies. So there you have it, Apollo Detectives 12 with Steve Mumbling. Now, I didn't ever think this would. I honestly did not think this program would ever happen, because, as you know, I was under the impression that Steve Mumbling would never be allowed to do any real, any real interaction with us. But as far as I'm concerned, that's up to Colin Sugrin. If he feels magnanimous, then he's the one slighted. It should be him who decides, and it appears he's not that bothered by it. So, which is why Steve decided to come on board. Now, it's quite interesting. I think it's very, very interesting, and not least it's interesting because for several reasons. Steve's original demand was this be done live, because he said that's the only way he felt he could get a fair hearing. However, At the end, you'll actually be able to hear this on his own channel, because at the end of the recording, we said to Steve when we finished recording that he was quite entitled to download his own version of the raw file from the Skype recording, which he did. He's downloaded the files. There were two files. There's one long one short one. He downloaded them both, and he's uploaded them onto his channel, edited together. So, if you want, you can go to Steve Mumbling's channel, and you can watch the original raw file, which as it was on Skype before Neil did all this editing work. And I think that he was under the impression that we would edit him. He jokes and he says, so this is just going to be 15 minutes long because you're just going to edit the whole thing, aren't you? You're just going to edit me out, and you're going to misrepresent me and twist my words and things like that. Well, obviously, we put Steve in a position where if we committed that crime, if we actually did edit him unfairly and misrepresent him, he'd be in the perfect position to expose us, because he would have his own version of the program in the form of a raw file. Now, after you've watched this particular video that you've just seen, you can go and watch Steve Mumbling's version of it, which is a completely unedited, simple, basic recording of what went into what Neil produced, and you can judge for yourself whether or not we misrepresented him. Now, in my view, we didn't. And he's not complained about such a thing yet, which means he's probably aware of that himself. Although Steve will never admit this, but I think he's going to have he has to face the fact that we treated him respectfully, well, as respectfully as we could, probably more so than he deserved. But at least we treated him professionally and honestly. In terms of his conduct, as I've always said, we're all grown men. Marcus, Scott, myself, Neil. We're not quivering wallflowers. So anything Steve gives us, we can give back just as well, and we do. So, in terms of the effect Steve's behaviour had, I mean, you must say Steve's belligerence, his rudeness, has really done nothing except expose him. It's exposed him for who he is. So, I mean, I think it's a sad thing really, because when Steve uploaded the raw files, which he did several weeks ago, he did soon after the recording. Everyone was commenting, saying, "Yeah, Steve, yeah, you handed Scott his ass on a plate," and things like this. And some people actually even commenting on my channel and saying that this is what Steve had done. He'd handed Scott his ass on a plate. I can't stand these bloody expressions, I really can't. But there you go. It's sad, I suppose, but you see, I think this is really the depths to which we've descended, or maybe there's always been an element of this. But I mean, when I was debating with Bowler Hatman, someone commented later on and just said, "Oh, he's running rings around you, Ben. He's running rings around you, not because he has better arguments, but because of something else." I mean, I suppose we got to the point where debate is not what I would like it to be. Debate should be a respectful exchange of ideas, which then can be tested against each other through rebuttal and counter-rebuttal until one is proved right, and one position is proved right and the other is wrong. Of course, that's not what happens. What you get instead is that people will assert a certain position, and then they'll call you names and shout at you if you disagree. And very often the winner is chosen by the one who is loudest and most raucous and rudest tends to be the one declared the winner. And that's a shame. It's a shame that there's that level of dishonesty. I call it pigeon chess. Now, what I mean by pigeon chess, the best chess player in the world is a pigeon. You know why? Because you can sit down beside a pigeon with your pieces lined up. Now, do you think you could beat that pigeon in chess? No, you can't, because the pigeon will just strut all over the board, kicking over the pieces and doing, defecating everywhere, leaving droppings all over the board. Then it will strut off, and all the pieces were kicked over, and he's won. You see, that makes him a pigeon is the best chess player in the world. So there you go. So that's kind of what debates are like, really, and. But the people, I mean, I'm not appealing to the people who are impressed with that kind of attitude. The people, you really have to be a bit of an NPC, really, or a liar, really, to accept this. I'm appealing to the people who are not, because if you actually analyse the points that were made on both sides, you'll see quite clearly that Steve actually he doesn't actually make very many points, and he's pretty much. And those he does make are rebutted by Scott and by Marcus. And indeed, this new edit with which Neil has done has included some of the material that Scott couldn't come up with off the top of his head. So it's if you look at it, I mean, I even pointed this out. I mean, after Steve had been bloody ranting and raving and calling, and interrupting and giggling and things like that for about 20 minutes, I pointed out to Steve, I said, "Steve, you actually only made 2 points in this entire diatribe." The point was about microwaves, the transmission of microwaves through the Earth's atmosphere and the altitude of geosynchronous satellites. Those are the only 2 points he made. All the rest, it was, "Oh, you goose, you idiot, you fool, you don't know nothing. You're not." You see, I'm glad I made that point during this particular episode of the Apollo Detectives. As far as my moderating goes, now you can make your own mind up. There were some who will tell you that I was too hard on Steve. There are some of you will come and tell me, and you'll come and tell me that I was too easygoing on Steve. I think I handled it pretty well. I think I did a good job there. I pulled him at the line when I needed to. I also interjected when I thought he was made a mistake, and another person didn't point it out. And again, I think if people who are honest and people who are reasonable and people who understand these things can see very clearly, Steve lost this debate. I think this is a very gratifying victory for the Apollo detectives. Steve lost the debate because he spent all his time pretending he'd won when he hadn't. He spent all his time ranting and raving, being rude, being belligerent, and having all his points knocked over one after another after another. So I'm glad this has happened. Obviously, Steve, I think it's not a secret that Steve will not be returning to the Apollo detectives, but it's done. He's been on. He can't complain anymore. And I think he's found himself wanting, and I think in the long run, he may well consider this a very embarrassing moment for himself. And I'm sure people watching, if you have a single degree of honesty, or if you're willing to express any, and even if you have it and not willing to express it, and there's far more of those than there are people who are genuinely misled or dishonest, you'll have to admit that too. So that was Apollo Detectives 12. Thank you, all of you, for watching Panwo TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.